James wasn't looking for trouble that Thursday evening. He was looking for his wife's phone charger. What he found instead was Linda's unlocked phone on the bathroom counter. A text notification glowing on the screen. "Can't wait to taste you again tonight, baby. Your husband's so clueless." The sender's name made his blood frizz. Sophia, Linda's best friend since college. The woman who'd been at their wedding, who stayed over twice a week, who Linda called her sister from another mother. James's hands trembled as he scrolled up. Months of messages unfolding like a horror novel he couldn't stop reading. Explicit photos, hotel receipts, inside jokes about him, how boring he was in bed. How Sophia made Linda feel alive in ways he never could. How they'd laugh about his failed promotion while tangled in each other's arms. His chest tightened, room spinning, knees buckling, as 7 years of marriage shattered in 7 minutes of scrolling. For exactly 90 seconds, James sat on the bathroom floor and wept quietly, hands pressed against his mouth to muffle the sound. Because Linda and Sophia were downstairs watching a movie together, probably touching each other on his couch. Then something inside him went cold and sharp. He carefully placed the phone exactly where he'd found it, washed his face, and walked downstairs with a smile that felt like wearing someone else's skin. That's when James stopped crying and started planning. They wanted to play him for a fool. Fine, but fools don't throw the kind of party he was about to throw. Before we continue, I see you watching, but not subscribing, and it's completely free. I bring you these powerful stories daily, and I'm racing toward 1,000 subscribers. Help me reach that goal. It takes just 2 seconds. The next morning, James kissed Linda goodbye like nothing had changed. Watched her smile, that smile he'd once loved, now seeing the lie behind every tooth. She mentioned Sophia was coming over that evening for dinner, and James said, "Great, I'll grab wine," with such normalcy that Linda squeezed his hand affectionately. Every touch felt like betrayal wrapping around his skin, but he kept his face neutral, kept breathing, kept playing the clueless husband they thought he was. At work, James couldn't focus his mind, replayed those messages. Those photos, Sophia's face at their wedding giving that toast about true friendship and true love. The rage that bubbled up was so physical. He had to lock himself in a bathroom stall and practice breathing exercises he'd learned for anxiety years ago. But rage was useless without direction, and James was nothing if not methodical. By lunch, he'd made 3 decisions. First, he would document everything before confronting anyone. Second, he would protect his assets immediately. Third, he would choose the moment of revelation carefully, publicly, devastatingly. When Sophia arrived that evening with her bright smile and tight hug that lingered too long, James hugged back and asked about her day, poured her expensive wine, laughed at her jokes, watching them together, the way Linda's hand rested on Sophia's knee, how their eyes met with secret understanding, was like swallowing glass. But he smiled through dinner, complimented Sophia's new haircut, suggested they all go out Friday night. The women exchanged delighted looks. James excused himself to the bathroom and forwarded every message, every photo from Linda's cloud backup to his secure email, his hands steady as a surgeon's. He had work to do. Over the next week, James became a ghost in his own life, present but hollow. Watching his wife and her lover move through their affair with stunning casualness, he tracked Linda's location through their shared phone plan and discovered a pattern. Tuesday and Thursday yoga classes were actually room 347 at the Riverside Hotel. Friday, girls' nights ended at Sophia's apartment until 2 a.m. Even Sunday brunch with the book club was code for something else entirely. James spent his lunch breaks in his car reviewing bank statements. Linda had been spending their joint account money on gifts for Sophia, expensive lingerie he'd never seen, restaurants they'd never visited together. The audacity was almost impressive. He consulted a divorce attorney named Patricia Chen, who listened without judgment, took notes, and said coldly, "You want to make this count. Get more. Get irrefutable evidence. And whatever you do, don't let her know you know." James installed a recovery app on the home computer that captured deleted messages. There were hundreds, going back 18 months. His wife hadn't just cheated, she'd built an entire second life. One deleted message stopped his heart. "Can't believe we pulled off the whole best friend cover for this long. Your husband's so sweet, it's almost sad. But God, the way you touch me is worth every lie." That message was sent the morning of their 6th anniversary. The day James had surprised Linda with breakfast in bed and tickets to Paris, He'd actually seen them giggling over Linda's phone that morning and thought they were planning something nice for him. He'd been such a fool, but not anymore. James scheduled a meeting with an accountant, moved half their savings to a separate account Patricia confirmed was legal in their state, and gathered every receipt, every message, every photo into a folder labeled evidence. The final touch came when he discovered Linda's birthday party was in 3 weeks. Sophia was organizing it. Naturally, perfect, just perfect. Those 3 weeks were the longest performance of James's life. Every day an Oscar-worthy act of the devoted husband who suspected nothing. He helped Linda choose her birthday dress. A red number, she said, was for him, but he knew was for Sophia. He pretended not to notice when Linda spent 2 hours getting ready for coffee with coworkers, or when she came home smelling like Sophia's distinctive jasmine perfume. At night, when Linda reached for him less frequently now, but still occasionally to maintain the illusion, Chance closed his eyes and imagined what kind of person could touch their husband after being with their lover. The answer was someone he'd never really known. He started working late deliberately, giving them more freedom, watching through the doorbell camera as Sophia's car pulled up 15 minutes after he left, watching them kiss on his porch like teenagers. Each video was saved, time-stamped, backed up. James's coworker Marcus noticed something was off, asked if everything was okay at home. And James just smiled and said, "Never better, actually planning a surprise for Linda's birthday." That wasn't technically a lie. Patricia filed preliminary divorce papers, but held them at James's request. He wanted everything signed and ready, but not filed until after the party. The prenuptial agreement Linda had reluctantly signed before their wedding would protect most of his assets, but the infidelity clause, which she'd laughed about, saying we'll never need this, meant she'd walk away with almost nothing. Sophia, meanwhile, had no idea what was coming. She worked at the same marketing firm as Linda, and James had quietly reached out to their HR department with concerns about inappropriate workplace relationships. He didn't file anything formal yet, just planted seeds. The weekend before the party, Linda asked James to help pick up decorations with Sophia, and James spent 2 hours in Michael's craft store watching them touch hands over ribbon spools, sharing secret smiles, while he pushed the cart and made jokes. He was so good at pretending now that it scared him a little. Who was this man wearing his face? 5 days before the party, James received the final divorce documents from Patricia, every clause reviewed and ironclad. He kept them in his car trunk, alongside a folder containing printed copies of every message, every photo, every hotel receipt, every piece of evidence documenting the affair, over 300 pages, organized chronologically. Patricia had also prepared a civil suit against Sophia for alienation of affection, still legal in their state, which could cost her tens of thousands of dollars. You want maximum impact, Patricia had said, financial and social. Make it impossible for them to dismiss or deny. James had nodded. He was done being nice. He'd also hired a private investigator named Marcus Reeves, who'd captured photos of Linda and Sophia entering hotels, kissing in parking lots, shopping for matching jewelry that Linda claimed she'd bought for herself. Marcus's final report was damning and dispassionate. Subject engages in regular, intimate contact with co-conspirator. Demonstrates clear romantic involvement. Shows no indication of remorse or hesitation. The clinical language somehow made it worse. James read it twice and felt nothing, which worried him until Patricia explained that numbness was normal, his brain protecting him from processing too much pain at once. He'd feel it later, she warned. But right now, the numbness was useful. 2 days before the party, James withdrew another significant portion of their joint savings. Legally his right, since both names were on the account, and deposited it in his new account. He paid off his credit cards, transferred the card title solely to his name, and changed the locks on their house with new keys. He didn't give Linda. She wouldn't notice until after Saturday. He also hired a professional videographer named Tanya, who thought she was filming a surprise birthday video, but was actually going to capture something else entirely. The guest list for Linda's party included 30 people, their families, work colleagues, friends from college, and everyone would be there to witness what James had planned. Sophia had rented a private room at an upscale restaurant, arranged for champagne and a custom cake, even organized a slideshow of photos from Linda's life. James had contributed several photos himself, smiling as he handed them over, knowing what was really going to appear on that screen. The night before the party, James barely slept, adrenaline and anxiety warring in his chest. Was he really going to do this? That Friday evening, Linda came home excited, talking rapidly about the party tomorrow, how Sophia had planned everything perfectly, how it would be the best night of her life. James listened and nodded and poured her wine, watching her drink. While texting Sophia, he could see the screen reflection in the kitchen window. Can't wait to celebrate with you tomorrow. Baby, wish we could ditch everyone and just be alone. The casual cruelty of it was almost beautiful in its clarity. Later, Linda suggested they go to bed early. Actually initiated intimacy for the first time in weeks. And James realized with cold understanding that she was doing this to assuage guilt, to maintain the performance, or maybe to genuinely celebrate before her big day. He went through the motions, felt nothing. And afterwards, when Linda fell asleep quickly with a satisfied smile, James lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering who he'd become. The man he'd been 3 weeks ago would never have planned what he was about to do. That James believed in communication, therapy, working things out. But that James was dead, killed by a text message on a bathroom counter. This James understood that some betrayals were unforgivable, that trust once shattered couldn't be glued back together with apologies and promises. This James knew that. Revenge wasn't about cruelty. It was about consequences, about refusing to be a victim, about standing up and saying, "You don't get to do this to me," without repercussions. At 3 a.m., James got up and went to his office, opened the folder one more time, looked at the evidence that would destroy his marriage publicly tomorrow. Part of him is small, dying part wanted to just file for divorce quietly, walk away with dignity, let them have each other. But dignity for whom? The man who'd been made a fool of for 18 months. The husband who'd bought his wife anniversary gifts while she laughed about him with her lover. No, they'd chosen public deception. James closed the folder, went back to bed, and surprisingly slept soundly for the remaining 3 hours before dawn. Tomorrow would be unforgettable. Saturday afternoon arrived with perfect weather, sunshine streaming through windows as Linda spent 3 hours getting ready, Sophia texting constantly with updates and heart emojis. James wore his best suit, the navy one Linda had bought him last Christmas. Another layer of iron yarn drove them to the restaurant at 5. The private room was decorated beautifully. White balloons, elegant flowers, a table of champagne flutes sparkling under ambient lighting. Guests arrived in clusters, hugging Linda, wishing her happy birthday. While James shook hands and accepted compliments on what a thoughtful husband he was, Sophia arrived fashionably late in a dress that matched Linda's red shade matching. How Q-Tan kissed Linda on the cheek, just a fraction too long. James saw his mother notice, saw the slight frown, but she said nothing. His younger brother Daniel approached and whispered, "You seem tense." James smiled and said, just waiting for the right moment, which Daniel took as referring to some surprise gift. Tanya, the videographer, was already set up, camera recording everything. And James had given her specific instructions. Keep filming no matter what happens. Capture all reactions. Don't stop until I say stop. She'd looked confused but agreed. The slideshow equipment was ready, hooked to James's laptop instead of the one Sophia had prepared. A last-minute swap, he'd insisted on claiming technical difficulties with her file. Sophia had been annoyed, but Linda had smoothed it over. James is so good with technology, honey. Let him handle it. The irony was delicious. Dinner was served. Conversations flowed with wine and laughter. And Linda looked genuinely happy, surrounded by people she loved, completely unaware that her world was about to implode. Sophia kept catching her eye across the room, with secret smiles that made James's jaw clench. After the main course, Linda's father stood to give a toast, then her college roommate, then Daniel, all sweet, all oblivious. Finally, James stood up, glass in hand, and the room quieted. "I have something special planned," he said, voice steady. "A video tribute to Linda, our marriage, and the people who've meant the most to her." Linda's eyes went teary with anticipation. Sophia raised her glass encouragingly. James clicked play. But the video that appeared wasn't birthday memories. The screen filled with text messages, screenshots scrolling slowly enough for everyone to read. Linda's face went white. Sophia stood up so fast her chair fell backwards. The room went from confused, murmuring to shocked silence in 5 seconds as people read intimate messages between Linda and Sophia. Explicit photos blurred just enough to be shown in public, but clear enough to understand exactly what they depicted. Hotel receipts with names and dates, a timeline of 18 months of betrayal. James had edited it perfectly. No narration needed, just evidence speaking for itself in chronological order. Each image time-stamped and geotagged, impossible to deny or explain away. Linda found her voice first. "James, stop. Stop it right now. What are you doing?" But James stood calmly by the projector, arms crossed, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm giving you the public celebration you two clearly wanted. 18 months of this, 18 months of lies. While I was working to support us, you were meeting her at hotels, spending our money on your affair. Laughing about how clueless I was, Sophia was crying now. Mascara, running, looking around wildly for support she wouldn't find. Linda's mother gasped, "Oh, honey." "No," and her father's face turned purple with rage, but James wasn't sure if it was directed at Linda or him for exposing it this way. The video continued. There was more. So much more, including deleted messages Linda thought were gone forever. Including audio clips James had recovered from Linda's phone backup where her voice moaned Sophia's name. That was when Linda tried to grab the laptop, but Daniel blocked her, having understood in 30 seconds what his brother had been planning. "Let it play out," Daniel said quietly, and Linda collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Guests were standing now, some leaving immediately, some frozen in shock. Some, like Linda's sister, actually approaching James to whisper, "I'm so sorry. We had no idea." The marketing firm colleagues were filming on their phones. James had expected that, welcomed it even. By Monday morning, everyone in their professional circle would know. Sophia's career was effectively over. When the video finally ended after 8 excruciating minutes, the room was silent except for Linda's broken crying and Sophia's angry shouting, "You vindictive bastard! You didn't have to do this." James turned to face her fully. "Actually, I did." James pulled out the folder from his bag, the physical evidence matching everything they'd just seen, and placed it on the table. "Divorce papers," he said to Linda, his voice eerily calm in the chaos. "Already prepared. Thanks to your prenup and the infidelity clause you insisted we'd never need, you get almost nothing. The house is mine, the car is mine, our savings are protected." Linda looked up, mascara-streaked face twisted in anguish and disbelief. "You can't. We can work through this. We can go to counseling." But James laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that silenced her. "Counseling? For what?" "To help me understand why my wife fucked her best friend in our bed while I was at work." The profanity shocked the remaining guests. He turned to Sophia. "And you? I've filed a civil suit for alienation of affection. You knowingly pursued a married woman, destroyed a marriage, and in this state that's legally actionable. My lawyer estimates you'll owe somewhere between $50,000 and $200,000, depending on how the judge feels." Sophia's face went from red to ash white. You can't be serious." Patricia Chen stepped forward from where she'd been waiting by the door. James had invited her specifically for this moment, handed Sophia an envelope. "Completely serious. You've been served. Court date is in 6 weeks. Bring your lawyer." Linda's father suddenly found his voice, standing up and pointing at James with shaking hand. "This is cruel, public humiliation. You didn't have to destroy her like this." James felt 18 months of pain surge up and out. Cruel? Cruel was every lie. Every time she kissed me after being with Sophia. Every anniversary and birthday where she pretended I mattered while planning her next hotel visit. I gave her 7 years of loyalty and got humiliation in return. So yes, I chose to return that humiliation publicly because they earned every second of this. His voice cracked slightly on the last word, but he steadied himself. Linda reached for his hand, a desperate gesture, and James stepped back like she was toxic. "Don't you lost that right the first time you touched her?" The room was emptying fast now. Guests uncomfortable and eager to escape, but Tanya was still filming, capturing Linda's collapse, Sophia's rage, the complete destruction of what was supposed to be a joyful celebration. James's mother approached, hugged him tightly, whispered, "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," which somehow hurt more than anything because it made this real, made it final. This was really happening. 3 months later, James sat in his newly redecorated living room. He'd replaced every piece of furniture that reminded him of Linda, repainted the walls, made the space entirely his, and realized he felt lighter than he had in years. The divorce was finalized. Linda got some personal items and a small settlement. James kept the house, the majority of savings, and his dignity. She'd sent one final letter, delivered through lawyers, claiming she'd never meant to hurt him, that she'd loved him and Sophia both, that she was sorry it happened this way, as if there was a right way to conduct an 18-month affair with your spouse's best friend. James had read it once and thrown it away. Sophia's trial ended with a settlement. She couldn't afford a lengthy court battle and agreed to pay $75,000 over 5 years, effectively bankrupting her. James donated that money to a charity for children of divorced parents. He didn't want her money, he'd wanted her accountability. The local gossip had mostly died down, replaced by newer scandals, though people still recognized James occasionally, either offering sympathy or awkward avoidance. His friends had mostly been supportive, though a few particularly mutual friends of Linda's had accused him of cruelty and cut ties. James was okay with that. Anyone who thought public humiliation was worse than 18 months of private betrayal wasn't someone he needed in his life anyway. Work became easier without the weight of deception crushing him daily. His promotion came through in month 4, possibly because his boss admired the strategic execution James had demonstrated, possibly just coincidence. Daniel visited weekly to play video games and check in, never mentioning Linda unless James brought her up first, which was rarely. James's mother had taken him to dinner and said something he'd never forget. "You taught yourself that you matter. That's worth more than any marriage." At night, James slept soundly in his bed with new sheets. No ghosts of betrayal haunting him. No more wondering where Linda was or who she was with. He was alone, but not lonely. There was a crucial difference. He'd started therapy, processing the trauma with a professional named Dr. Garrett, who congratulated him on protecting himself, but also gently suggested that revenge, however satisfying, didn't heal the wound, only cauterized it. James was working on healing now, slowly, carefully. Some days were harder than others. 6 months after the party, James went on his first date with someone new, a woman named Claire he'd met at a coffee shop, who knew nothing about his past and treated him like a person rather than a story. It didn't lead anywhere romantic, but it reminded him he was capable of trusting again. Eventually, maybe. He wasn't rushing. The experience with Linda had taught him to be cautious, to watch for red flags, to trust his instincts when something felt off. He'd ignored signs for months before finding that phone. Little inconsistencies he'd explained away because he'd wanted to believe the best in his wife. Never again. James heard through mutual acquaintances that Linda and Sophia had tried to make their relationship work after everything lasted about 2 months before imploding spectacularly. Apparently, when you build a relationship on betrayal and sneaking around, removing the secrecy also removes the thrill. They'd blamed each other for the fallout, each claiming the other had pushed for the affair, neither taking real responsibility. Linda was working retail now, her marketing career damaged by association with the scandal. Sophia had moved to another state, trying to outrun her reputation. James felt neither satisfaction nor sympathy hearing this. He felt nothing about them anymore, which felt like victory. His life became fuller in unexpected ways. He reconnected with college friends he'd neglected during marriage, took up woodworking as a hobby, planned a trip to Japan he'd always wanted to take but Linda had dismissed as too expensive. Turned out, when you weren't funding someone else's affair, you had money for yourself. Daniel joked that James had gone through a revenge globe, and honestly, looking at photos from a year ago versus now, he could see his posture was different, shoulders back, eyes clearer. He looked like someone who'd survived something difficult and come out intact. Because he had. The story of what happened at that birthday party became something James rarely told anymore. When new people asked why he was divorced, he just said irreconcilable differences and changed the subject. The people who mattered knew, and the people who didn't matter didn't need to. He wasn't defined by Linda's betrayal anymore, or by his response to it. He was just James, rebuilding, moving forward, learning who he was outside of that marriage. And honestly, he liked this version of himself better. A year after the party, almost to the day, James received a Facebook message from Sophia. She'd created a new account to bypass his block's long rambling apology, claiming she'd been in therapy, realized the damage she'd caused, wanted James to know she was truly sorry, and hoped he'd found peace. James read it once, felt a flicker of the old anger, then just closed it without responding. She didn't deserve his forgiveness, his acknowledgement, or his attention. Some people apologize to make themselves feel better, not to actually make amends, and James had learned to recognize the difference. He deleted the message and went about his day brunch with friends, afternoon woodworking session, evening call with a woman he'd been seeing casually for a month who actually respected boundaries and communicated honestly. Radical concepts, apparently. His life wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and after years of living in someone else's deception, honesty felt like luxury. Looking back, James didn't regret the party. People had called it cruel, excessive, disproportionate, and maybe it was. Maybe he'd become someone harder and colder than he'd wanted to be. But betrayal changes you, and he'd chosen to let it make him stronger rather than bitter, protective rather than cynical. He'd learned that trust was a gift you give carefully, that loyalty was rare and precious, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be someone's fool. The exposure at that party wasn't about punishing Linda and Sophia, though it certainly did. That was about reclaiming his narrative, refusing to be the clueless husband in someone else's story. Standing up and saying, "I see what you did, and I will not quietly absorb this damage." Was it the moral high road? Probably not. Did it feel like justice? Absolutely. And in the end, James had learned the most important lesson. Trust is earned. Loyalty is sacred, and when someone betrays both, they lose the right to control how their story ends. Betray someone who loved you completely, and you'll learn why some people should never be crossed. Have you ever had to choose between forgiveness and self-respect? Sometimes protecting yourself means refusing to be noble about someone else's cruelty. James had chosen self-respect, and he'd never looked back. By the time James left the restaurant an hour later, Linda was still sitting in that chair, catatonic, surrounded by her family trying to figure out what to do with her. Sophia had fled after threatening to sue James for defamation, a hollow threat, since everything he'd shown was true and the event coordinator was trying to figure out who was paying the bill. James paid it, tipped generously despite everything because the staff didn't deserve to suffer for this mess, and walked out into the parking lot where Daniel was waiting by his car. "That was the most brutal thing I've ever seen," Daniel said quietly, and James couldn't tell if it was admiration or horror in his voice. "Yeah," James agreed, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was fading and his hands were shaking, reality crashing in. "You think I went too far?" Daniel considered, then shook his head. "I think you did what felt necessary. Whether it was right, man, I don't know. But I get it." James drove home alone, the house empty and quiet in a way that felt both peaceful and devastating. His phone was exploding with texts, some supportive, some angry, some just shocked, but he silenced it and sat in his living room, the same room where Linda and Sophia had been together countless times, and finally let himself feel the full weight of the betrayal. He cried for the first time since that initial bathroom floor breakdown. Cried for the marriage he'd thought he had, for the wife who'd never really existed, for the future that had been stolen by lies. But underneath the grief was something else. Relief. The performance was over. The truth was out. He was free. Over the next week, the consequences unfolded like dominoes. Linda moved out, staying with her sister, texting James, constantly begging for a chance to explain, to apologize. To make things right, he blocked her number after 2 days. Sophia was fired from the marketing firm after an ethics investigation prompted by James's HR complaint. Her LinkedIn profile deleted, her social media scrubbed. The video, despite James's attempts to contain it, leaked online and went semi-viral in their city, making local news under headlines like "Birthday, Party Betrayal Exposed." James became simultaneously a hero of scorned partners everywhere, and a villain who'd taken revenge too far. He tried not to read the comments. Patricia moved forward with a divorce, everything proceeding smoothly since Linda had no leverage, no defense, no way to contest the ironclad evidence. The alienation of affection suit against Sophia was scheduled for trial. James felt nothing about it now, just numbness.